a lot of this has been abuse in plain sight. It was quite obvious what they were doing. Obviously, it's one thing to know they're doing something. It's another thing to have internal corporate documents, again, come out confirming that the Trump White House in some way was trying to manage information. I think the release today is a little bit coy about how that took place and what censorship resulted from that. And I just hope it's not a case of, that both sides are terrible, as opposed to I think the reality is that they had the Biden White House out there telling them to take people down, like my friend Andrew Bostom, who is back on, as you know from the files today. But this is really dangerous to the public health. This is not material that was taken down that was dangerous to the public health. When you tell people that they shouldn't listen to anyone other than particular government officials or corporate leaders on health issues, that's obviously dangerous to the public health. I don't think I need to explain that to the listeners here, that when Twitter becomes a medical expert, all bets are off in terms of your ability to protect yourself. And I saw early on that they got very nervous about Fauci. And, I didn't know anything more about Fauci than the average American at the beginning of the pandemic. Someone had released, I think over at the Last Refuge or Conservative Treehouse, had released a file from the 2016 where Fauci was praising China and talking about how Fauci was praising Hillary and talking about how he loved her. And I just tweeted out something saying, well, boy, isn't this interesting? That resulted in two news stories in the New York Times and the Washington Post, I think one of which tried to tie tweets like that to security issues for Fauci. So, I mean, you could actually present material on Twitter and still be oppressed and censored or defamed, which is in some ways the the ugly sister of censorship as well. And January, I think it was January 8th of 2021, around the time of this whole purge related to January 6th, they took down a tweet of mine or told me I needed to take it down, otherwise I wouldn't come back on, where I said hydroxychloroquine is a safe drug. And I used to post that once a week because I knew it was accurate. I didn't tell anyone to take anything about tie it to COVID. I also knew that people were unable to gain access to that and ivermectin, that otherwise needed it, for other reasons. And I knew the media and their allies in the public health establishment were lying about its safety and efficacy for things other than COVID. And so someone had complained about these tweets. I was a victim of either their internal operations or, the usual suspects. And they previously, just 2 months before, found the tweet not to be in violation of their rules. But in January, they said it was. And I needed to take it down, and no appeal was going to get it back up. And I was knocked out, the head of a major national transparency group, anti-government watchdog group, for 10 months until I took the tweet down. So, this didn't end with Trump. There was no emergency there and then that required them, which I don't think is sufficient, but, to the degree they had any defense, they were in a crisis in, let's say, March of 2020, and they started doing something that they probably shouldn't have done, but, that's life. But this was in 2021, and so they were using COVID to target, in my view, a critic or a supporter of the rule of law on elections. So you can't separate the two. So here, though, I just saw the headline out of this, besides our own direct involvement, as we've been hearing it before, is that the Biden White House is directly implicated in violations of law and the Constitution, targeting American citizens for censorship. I mean, they've admitted to it, but here we know that it took place. And this is, in my view, it's the tip of the iceberg. And if this doesn't result if this isn't part of an impeachment inquiry, I don't know what the purpose of those proceedings are for.